Hey, so game reviews are getting kind of messy, right? Like, I've seen so much of the discourse on reviewers. Are they out of touch? Why do reviews look like that? Why are the reviews for a game looking like this when it doesn't run very well? And obviously, it's Star Wars Jedi Survivor that kind of prompted this as another wave in, I think, a tide of feeling that we've been experiencing for quite a while. I've commonly seen the sentiment of people being mad at reviews, basically saying, like, you guys are not warning us about the technical performance of games. And we saw this exploding everywhere in, Reddit, comment sections, Twitter. Well, Connor and our team looked at every review. Yeah, he looked at every review on OpenCritic for that game. And we actually found that only 18 reviews did not mention the technical issues. 11 of those 18 do have, like, the actual outlets did have, like, articles specific to performance. And of the remaining 7, they are all from websites like The Financial Post and The Guardian. I mean, as an avid PC gamer, I always go to the Financial Post instead of Digital Foundry because they're a brand I can trust. But it was quite interesting. Almost every reviewer and site did discuss the technical issues, either in the review itself, which the vast majority did, or somewhere else, right? Like as an accompanying news piece. And generally, depending on the detail of the review, there was either something to that effect in the body of the text, linked in the news source, or like in the headline or title. So, for people who actually read the reviews, they did know, right? And that actually means that from a consumer advocacy point, even though there was a broad perception that this was not mentioned that much, actually it was mentioned almost everywhere. And that kind of means that we have a very interesting thing of where information comes from. Turns out, I think, when things get totally boiled down into, into an OpenCritic score, some nuance may be lost. And I think that maybe means that platforms like OpenCritic and Metacritic should evolve just a little bit more. And also, I think this explains the likes of ACG and SkillUp. It explains why them, Total Biscuit, and some of the more platform-oriented sites really have so much value in the modern day. So the argument basically is, like, this frame rate's not acceptable. How could you give that an 8 out of 10, right? So it's one of those things where reviewers give this as much weight as they think is necessary, but then the problem is some reviewers think, oh, FPS, that's more of a problem, that's less of a problem. As an example with Jedi Survivor, Matt was saying, you would almost be better playing that on the quality mode 30 FPS 4K, because at least then it is a stable 30 FPS, instead of a frame rate that is fluctuating all over the place, so that like your frame timings and that kind of thing don't really feel nice and creamy. That's an interesting example then. If a console reviewer played the PS5 version, which on the mode that I would want to play it is not playable because it can't hold its frame rate, but if they played it at the 4K 30, and actually they did get a really well executed console 30 FPS, and that's what they're used to from playing games like, I don't know, maybe God of War on quality mode, or The Last of Us, then they'll probably be really chuffed. Right? And this is where I think PC Gamer are, that's one of the reasons I follow them for such a long time. Here's what they say in their review policy. We always consider technical quality, we will report on it. FOV sliders and frame rates matter to us, and our score will reflect that. We don't believe it should be the burden of the review to be a de facto index of every technical issue that exists in a game. So overall, I agree. They don't have to do a Digital Foundry breakdown. That would be insane. But I like that, and it means that whenever I'm thinking about PC, I always personally weigh the PC Gamer review just like a little bit higher, because I know that they're going to be playing the game in the same way that I will. But as for other websites, not all of them are platform specialists, and not everybody's got the resources of IGN. And I know you might be saying, whoa, you just mentioned IGN in the context of a good thing, but most people probably don't know this. They actually have a performance review aside in, in some of their reviews where it's relevant, which I think is a pretty good idea. And it's the sort of thing that I think means we can soon converge on what a format for an ideal review is. Now there's other people saying, hey, you should review every version of the game, you should have footage of all of that. And it's just that kind of thing like, hey, some poor bastard has got to play a game for 30 hours in a like 1 week review window in order to hit embargo. It's just not possible. That's just not possible, and not everybody can do Digital Foundry. It is literally not financially viable, right? Like if everyone starts to do that. So overall then it means we don't have all these specialist reviews. And I remember at one point Polygon used to do a review, but then they would actually issue updates to the review that would even change the score. And they ended up abandoning that practice, I think because it's like as soon as you do that, you have to do it absolutely everywhere. And it turns out that is really hard to keep track of because it just gives you this very exponential sort of quantity of work. So overall then, we have people just saying your review should like reflect the things that I care about. And what we actually found out when we did the analysis of the actual reviews is that in many cases they did. It's just about how much the game's score is weighed by that. And that really is the challenge, because when things get turned into a score, everything's lost. A review could say, listen, I think that this as a game is a 9 out of 10, but I have a big red warning that says, buy this in a few months when it's patched. When that goes into OpenCritic and Metacritic, that big red buyer beware that, I mean, I'm sure in many cases didn't exist, but was sort of mentioned in the article, that gets completely stripped away. And then that leads to this consumer perception that the reviewers don't care. So then it's the thing of like, okay, do you then like give, because honestly for me, Jedi Survivor, if it ran like that, in my head, 5 out of 10. I don't want to buy it. Unless, you know, a 4090 can be manifested into existence, I don't want to play that game. I don't want to touch it. Because when I play it, if it's console, stable 60. If it's PC, I want stable 120. That's just the way that I am. But I think that that personal 5 out of 10 wouldn't be the most fair to do as a review that goes out everywhere. Because you see, there is a tricky issue in reviewing. The second that you put your review score down at launch, that gets slurped up by the aggregators. And if you change your review score, the aggregators don't change. And what we then end up finding out is that, you know, in the very first level, people, I mean, come on, who looks at a PC Gamer review? Don't be cheeky, I know we all do it. And you scroll right down to the bottom, you want to see the big number. And what you find is loads of sites like, say, Kotaku, they decided that they wanted to stop doing scored reviews because they felt like you just can't boil it all down to a number. Such as a situation where it's like, amazing game, don't buy it right now. Score can't really reflect that. But then what happens is if you don't have a number, you don't get as much clicks because the number really, really does work to get you those clicks. So that's the first level where people just scroll down to the review score. And then the second level is the review score being slurped into Metacritic. And now that we're all trained to enjoy film and television via the lens of Rotten Tomatoes, which really just says how uncontroversially decent is a movie. That's all Rotten Tomatoes says, basically. Now this actually leads to issues with discourse because unlike, you know, Rotten Tomatoes, like if you want to know, is this movie uncontroversially good or bad? Sure. But it's not like you're going to have an issue where like, oh, this movie doesn't run in your machine. So I think that's where the review aggregator is actually more problematic for video games. I think the best review aggregator, frankly, is Steam. And I really do think that because Steam just boils everything down to, at the point of giving the review, what did a human think? Yay or nay? And, you know, in a situation like us, we have a few too many bugs that, a few of which we didn't know about, a few of which were basically accidents, so yeah, we didn't know about them. And that gets reflected initially, we fix the bugs, and then the number goes up, because hey, we fixed the bugs. And Steam's really good because it says, oh look, they fixed the bugs. The newer reviews are better than the older ones. Happy days. It truly is the best. Moving on, I think this was, some of this was picked up in Chris's tweet. He's the reviews editor of Eurogamer, right? And it's going to the notion of some people think that a reviewer's job is to be correct. Almost like the idea, you know those mini games where you've got a bar and there's like a target in the bar, and then there's a thing that goes up and down, and you have to, you know, you have to hit your button right in the middle, almost like a skill reload in Gears of War. A lot of people feel that like a game reviewer's job is to like, you know, they're playing darts, they have to throw their dart, and they have to, you know, if they do a good job, they hit the bullseye of the review consensus. When in reality, that's not really what a review should be. A review should be a personal perspective from another human, so that you, the consumer, can like know that human and be like, ah, that's a human who I trust. And I think that's why a lot of these sites have problems, because from the perspective, imagine if SkillUp was a writer for IGN. Well, all of the branding of, oh, that Australian fella whose reviews I like, that goes away because now it's an IGN review. And I think that is why the likes of Total Biscuit did super well at the start, because people really want someone who they understand, trust, know where they agree, know where they disagree, and then that informs how they view their review. As an example, I don't like all the same games that SkillUp does, but I know what he does like. And that means it's like, oh yeah, well, if, he likes that, maybe I don't. Or, oh, he likes that for those reasons, I'll definitely like that. And that's why it's got so much utility. That's why I think you see Mandalore Gaming, ACG, SkillUp, and the many other reviewers out there actually do well. Not that it's always a big problem. I mean, Redfall is a good example. Like, unlike Jedi Survivor, Redfall did not have a good time critically. It got critically panned, right? And this takes us to something that's interesting, the history of video game reviews. Here's an example for Al-Qadim, The Genie's Curse from PC Gamer edition 8 from July of 1994, a month after I was born. They were doing this magazine. So this is back when it was all buyer's guide consumer magazines, right? And you look at it, right? The gameplay hangs for more on patience and persistence than creative thinking or problem solving. A cardinal sin for an RPG. The graphics are barely adequate. And you actually find these reviews sometimes that are more technical. I remember a lot of these older sites, they used to, or older publisher outlets, they would basically have like sound score out of 10, graphic score out of 10, technical performance score out of 10. And it's like, oh wow, you're reviewing a video game like we're reviewing a car. Like you're reviewing a washing machine or a Hoover, right? Now, this is totally an era of reviews that that were useful. Here is the GamePro game rating system, right? Each factor gets a different score, and the factors are graphics, sound, control, fun factor, challenge, right? And it's like, why are modern reviews not like that? Why are they not these like early internet print publication things that are very, they're more technical, they're written for engaged fans, they're focused on very numerical kind of things. And this is where we go to the movement of new games journalism, which is basically that's like a sort of title for the movement that was popularized by the founder of Rock Paper Shotgun, Kieran Gillen. Now, this kind of shifts the focus. Game magazines are primarily buying guides offering either information about forthcoming games or definitive reviews of said shiny consumer items. What to get excited about, what to put money down on, basically. Web coverage does both, usually quicker, and instead, he basically proposed a more experimental discussion of how we talk about games, essentially as pieces of media that have themes, context, sort of their meaning of art, so not just as a product. And then that's where you will run into a challenge, perhaps, with something like, Jedi Survivor. I think a lot of people would say that as a game with, that it does have those cinematic sort of ambitions. I don't think people are saying it's the most thematically deep game in the world or anything, but people are kind of saying like, oh no, what it sets out to do, it does really well. Its character work's really strong. The performances are really strong. This is super enjoyable and engaging. This is a fantastic piece of art. And the challenge is that piece of art will continue to be just as fantastic once those, technical fixes come. So then you're left in a tricky position where you're like, whatever I publish, that is going to be, for all time, the score that this piece of art gets. So how the hell do I entitle it? When as a piece of art, it's an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, but the technical issues really drag it down. Because where I personally would come in is I would say, actually, no, I want you to do a review of it as a piece of art. I'm happy with Jedi Survivor getting a 9 out of 10 with the caveat that there should be a big red box somewhere that says buyer beware. And I essentially think that the best thing to do is actually to go all in on reviewing them as a piece of art, as an overall sort of media experience. But for those technical things, it is to have some sort of buyer beware, like just ingrained at the site level. I think that essentially is the way forward. But then it gets completely scuppered by review aggregators. Because no matter what you do, somebody is going to go to OpenCritic, say, oh, Michael gave Jedi Survivor a 9. Not that I'd be on OpenCritic, but you get the point. I'd give it a 9 out of 10 with a big red box saying, don't fucking buy it now. That would be a really bad idea. It'll be fixed and way better. But the core experience is 9 out of 10. But if you saw that in OpenCritic, you just say, oh, Michael gave it a 9 out of 10? He's a PC gamer and it has issues. What crack pipe is he smoking? that is how their aggregators do kind of mess things up. But as anyone will say, your Metacritic matters, right? Now, thankfully, your Metacritic matters, I think, less today, where we've got Steam reviews and things like that really come in and kind of save us. Now, in case you're just thinking, oh dear, what has happened to Kieran Gillen? Has he decided to be one of the horsemen destroying consumer advocacy? No, he did say reviews that don't serve their basic consumer informing purpose are worse than useless. Yeah, it's like they're actively misleading then. You can't give Jedi Survivor a 9 out of 10 without providing the, doing the consumer advocacy work of saying, do not buy it right now, So essentially the new games journalism movement was focused on, okay, instead of just being kind of like big enthusiasts doing very technical enthusiast reviews, let's try to bring a level of media critique and analysis to this in the same way that, take film reviews, film reviews in modern day, I think, can be themselves a rather controversial topic. Let's not get into this, but I do like this description. This makes us travel journalists to imaginary places. Our job is to describe what it's like to visit a place that doesn't exist outside of the gamer's head. The gamer, not the game, remember. Go to a place, report on its cultures, foibles, distractions, and bring it back to entertain your readers. Right? So this is basically a framing device that allows a writer to talk about the good and the bad, how it works or doesn't work as part of the experience. So I suppose the analogy then is, oh yeah, this country, going there, total 10 out of 10. Love the culture, love the people. That said, I did get mugged and beaten up in a taxi, so what do you do then? Do you judge the whole place by the technical foible that appeared? It's kind of the challenging thing, and that is what makes good reviews really hard to write. But then as we move on from that, there is another issue. I'm sure we've all heard about the famous 7 out of 10, right? And there's so many times where people would say, oh, sometimes a perfect 7 out of 10 is the kind of game that I like. It's got a bit of heart. But no, I've thought that this was very interesting. And IGN, they even published an article saying, another 7 IGN? Why so many games score 7 and above? Well, it's one of those things like, where do you see people go and drop like a 3 out of 10? And the reason there is often because the scale goes from non-functional to must play. So 5 out of 10 is like, yeah, it's functional, it works, it's just not very good. And that's fairly rare, I'm sure you've seen the Skill Up Redfall video. Like, Redfall was getting 4s and 5s out of 10s, right? So it's kind of interesting even seeing IGN's own engagement with how they get memed on. And it's ultimately because a game that's like, yeah, it works, does some things well, doesn't have some other things that I would want, 7 out of 10. Turns out that 7 being the average is kind of a really good indictment of the industry. Like, in a way it does actually show that our baseline has moved up, right? It's moved up to a certain point that's actually really quite good. I don't really know how that would be compared to, say, like film or something. I don't know where they would be averaging on reviews, or if people are like, oh, it's another 3.5 star. But yeah, that thing from IGN is like, they don't review the 3 out of 10s, 4 out of 10s. For a game to be reviewed by IGN, it's probably got to be a large enough indie. And if it is that big enough, then it's selection bias. I think selection bias is massive here. There are loads of 2 out of 10s in Steam, but they're not newsworthy enough for anyone to cover, right? Unless it's in some sort of like comedic piece. And I think it's within this overall context, the way that print reviews happen, web print even, and aggregators. I think that take, the before you buy, I think it's at GameRanks. It's always like a man in a suit going, like that with like the, main character from a game's head photoshopped on. And they're called Before You Buy. ACG, who, there's, was it the ACG? It's, buy, wait for a sale, or skip, or whatever. That works really well. You look at a Skill Up title, and it's like, well, shit. Now I know this is of great value. And ultimately, that's why we get to this situation of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, 85 average, 90% of critics recommend. You look at that and you think, I have to buy this right now. Even though whenever Connor on our team, I think it was just under 100 reviews at the time, even when he looked at all those reviews and he found that almost every single one mentioned the technical issues. And where does that leave us? Especially in this time where technical issues are ridiculous, where PC ports, I mean, it's been the ongoing, and I don't mean meme in a joke way, I mean meme in a, like, you know, a self-spreading idea. It's been the ongoing meme in PC gaming that we're just getting shit these days because, well, I don't know what reason. Probably PC's a bit harder to nail than console, and we're not a primary target. You know, in terms of like your system isn't the primary launch platform for a game. But you know, it has been kind of wild. I think that's why the likes of like your scale-ups, Digital Foundries have become more and more important. So ultimately, this is what we need to get rid of. I think we need the review aggregators to, and I suppose this is the problem, because like, what is their business model? How do they make money? I wonder. But they need something, because even in the case of especially OpenCritic, because OpenCritic is about video games, I think it needs a new feature, because we have the score average, we have the recommendation. Can we not have a bar under that that's like, you know, launch performance index, or like, you know, buyer beware, or something like that, almost like a pinned comment? Could you have, you know, the way you have the ESRB ratings? I don't know, like, could you have X amount of, then see, the problem is the more you subdivide that, I think just some sort of like warning that can be flagged up if a certain number of reviews are mentioning launch performance. There just needs to be something there, because I think if you saw this, but you also saw, like, just where my mouse is, like, just some text that said, warning, launch issues reported, then people wouldn't necessarily look at all these reviews and think, look at these out-of-touch journalists who all either aren't PC gamers, don't care about PC gamers, or all have 4090s from their outlets and don't want to talk about performance. Because that's actually not reflective of what they said. So maybe if OpenCritic and the likes could step up their game and work with the reviewing sites, maybe then one of these particularly annoying issues in gaming, you know, could be solved. And finally, we've really engaged with how a review is useful to somebody, right? But let's just talk about how a review is useful or not to the media sites. Here's the truth. Game reviews don't make money. Like, really, they do not. If you want to make money, you cover news and you do SEO-friendly guides. That's how the business works, folks. That's just how it is. I don't make the rules, but that is what every single outlet reports. They drive almost no traffic compared to consistent guides or a particularly relevant news story. I mean, sometimes those news stories, you can get a press release, write up the press release, provide some context, your own thoughts, some further reading. You could do that in 30 minutes. That, if it's the right story, will make more money, right? Because a click is a click, a page view is a page view. That will make more money than spending 35 hours reviewing a game. Game reviews are something that you do for your most core audience and for prestige. That's the only way that they make sense. But in an advertising-driven world, they do not make sense. Now, you might say, skill up, ACG. And then I would say, survivorship bias. There are thousands of people probably doing pretty good reviews on YouTube, and you never see them, because that's how the algorithm works, right? And that is a pretty damn rough thing. And for the likes of Skill Up, he's been doing this for a very long time. What, like 6-7 years? Takes a long time to build that up. Same for Mandalore. Same for ACG, right? That's the troublesome thing. I mean, if, like, I think even a good reason for like Skill Up having the, you know, This Week in Gaming is it really does help bring up your average numbers. Like, it does. And also it's stuff that you want to talk about. I mean, as an example, over in our World of Warcraft channel, we do the Warcraft news every week on a Saturday. And that is one of those things where, like, it's fun, but also compared to anything else we do, it takes like a third of the time, and generally speaking, we'll earn more money. We do the other stuff like guides and more in-depth things because that's super fun, and sometimes those things do super well. But when we're planning out our content, it's like, no, you got to do the news. Doing the news, it's like the freebie that gives you the fuel to do the other things that maybe don't make as much sense, but you really want to do because, you know, you're ultimately doing your job because you're passionate about it. Like, that's what it's like for us, and that's what it's like for many of these sites. You know, it's the idea of like, okay, you get to do a game review. In return for that, you must write SEO guides for Hogwarts Legacy to make us all the money in the universe. So if you're ever wondering why game reviews seem to take less priority and why every single site is always giving you your Destiny guides and your Hogwarts guides, it's just because of SEO. That's how it is. unless you can carve out that niche. And of course, you know the influencer style of that. There are examples of Edge and Famitsu. Those are magazines people kind of review or would take their reviews as meaning more. That's why, like, you know, whenever we for Pale Beyond got an 8 out of 10 from Edge, like, that was an absolutely thrilling experience, because it's like, oh shit, Edge magazine, they're like real, you know? And the other side, finally, and this is something where it actually did bite us in the ass with our game, especially with the Polygon review, and it's not the Polygon reviewer's fault whatsoever. The review process with embargoes is kind of wacky. So with us, the press build went out in December. That was never going to be the build the game launched with, but it was something we didn't have control over, right? Like, me and Thomas didn't have control over that. It's just like that in the grand machine that is publishing this game. This is when that happens. So the version of our game that reviewers reviewed, it's kind of weird. We fixed almost all of the bugs that the reviewers had found. They were way fixed by launch, but one of those fixes broke something else in a way that we did not catch and slipped through like a few rounds of QA testing, which is like totally our bad. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, during the review process, like, patches happen. All these reviewers, they talk about the idea of mid-review patches. Now, this is going to be challenging. Let's just say you're doing your review, you know there's going to be a day one patch, but there are performance issues in the game right now. So you probably have to say, when I played the game, there were performance issues, but they say there's a day one patch. Now, if that review is coming out 2 days before the game comes out, that puts you in a pretty damn tricky position. Because now it's like, okay, Schrodinger's performance. Who knows? And this is just another way that the mechanics of the game review process make it harder to get true clarity. And that, I think, is why the good old Steam review is so valued by us. So as a summary, the game's review process is fundamentally shaped by commercial interests, audience needs, and creative requirements, and all of those things are in tension with one another. There are no good answers other than some audiences understanding that not all reviews are for them specifically, and we review game reviews as a solid 7 out of 10. Come on. It had to end like this. As for my recommendations, I think it's quite simple. More sites need to have just a buyer beware section, a before you buy section, a little bit on just 100% consumer advocacy. It only needs to be a paragraph or two. I think every site needs to have something like that. And even if they do mention something in their article normally, I think having that as a little call out, as a part of the format, that would help educate viewers, readers to understand this is the bit about the art, this is the bit informing me of any other things that I really should know as a consumer in the market. And then the review aggregate sites have got to step up to the plate and work out how they can work in consumer advocacy. Because while these aggregate sites are fine for film and TV, they just don't make as much sense with games for those technical reasons. All right, that's it for today. What do you think? And let me know down below. What's your favorite game reviewer? Be it print, be it magazine, be it online, be it on YouTube. I'd love to know. I'm always looking for more, great voices in the space. Have a great day. See you next time.